Hello, everybody. Once again, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings. This is our second episode. Once again, I, Leamon Crafton Jr., am one of your hosts. We are also joined again by Mark Malcolm. And today, instead of JM, we have a special guest host of Michael Roderick, who goes by Rod.
And I apologize to the folks who are stuck with me over JM. I understand he's very entertaining, so I'll do my best.
So before we get into things, if you want to know about myself or Mark, you can go back to the first episode. But we'd like to know about Rod. So Rod, tell us about your beginnings of Torg and or Torg Eternity and kind of your pathway down that.
I had started with the original Torg. I think it was probably about 91 or 92. Sounds about right. A friend who the same one who had introduced me to role-playing games in general, introduced me to that game. He had tried, and I know last week you and JM talked about Rifts. He had introduced me to that, and I hate to say to you guys, I was like, ooh, no thank you. But Torg, he introduced me to that, and I went, ooh, I like this. So I played, right, we ran through the Lizard and the Lightning scenario that was in that book. Choose Your Own Adventure. I did that. I did all of it. And I loved the game. Finished high school, no one to play with. For years, there was no one to play with. I got all the books. I got doubles of the books because they were getting old on some of them. And I absolutely loved it. I read them mostly as reading material. Finally, after I moved from New York to Georgia, I met Mark and a couple other folks and started up a Torg home game. And it was everything I had wanted it to be, right? And Torg, it was always enough of what I wanted it to be, the variety, the lore, the Cosms, the Cosmverse, pretty much everything that we're hopefully going to be talking about has influenced every other RPG that I look for. Right? If I go play the most well-known RPG, I look for the setting that reminds me of Torg. I unconsciously bring that forward to almost everything I do. I was actually about 6-7 years ago, I said, okay, I want to play Torg again, but all the material is so old, and getting new players to read all those old books, I've had no success. So what can I do? And I thought, you know what? Let me take this other system. I figured, let me convert Torg to the Fate system. I started doing that. I'm typing it. I was a good ways through. I'm trying to figure out, how do I do experience? How do I do possibilities? And all of a sudden, I see an announcement that Torg Eternity is coming. And it's literally like I took everything and went, goodbye, and chucked it, right? I was done with it. And day one funded, and we've been doing Torg Eternity since. At the time, Mark had a lot going on and wasn't as available to play as he is now. And so I had started the Torganized play of, hey, let's try to get more people to play, hoping let's get a nice big campaign of, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of people. And it started out mostly in the Atlanta area, which is where I am. And then as COVID hit, right, one of the silver linings for me was, hey, all of a sudden people are like, I need to play online. So we've had a lot of folks playing online. A lot of those folks have gone back to their in-person games, but we still tend to have a lot of folks who have trouble finding a GM, who are an eternal GM, right? I think you've said that yourself. I'm always the guy running. Or ones who just, for whatever reason or another, their schedule makes it hard for them to get into a regular group. So we find ways to accommodate them with, hey, I can run at such and such date and time. We throw it up and we get signups, and hopefully more people get to play. So, yeah, I run and play a lot of Torg. I think it's about 2,000 hours GM'd, and we'll add about another 4 or 6 hours, hopefully tomorrow, when I run the home game. So I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, we're on for tomorrow. Saturday was shot in the head before the weekend started, but tomorrow's good.
So very good. Thank you for that. So as Rod kind of hinted at, we're going to do kind of a general overview of Myth and the setup for Torg Eternity, what it kind of entails, why you might be interested in getting into the game, why it's different, which is, to me, it's kind of the whole setting idea of the infinitiverse and the Cosmverses is intriguing. We hinted at it and discussed the tiny portions of that in the last episode, but this one we're kind of going to, at the same time, getting more in depth. We're not going to get into the technical details because those technical details will be future episodes, because we would like to keep this Delphi Council debriefings going. So the first topic that I want to hit on, and we did kind of talk about that in episode 1, is realities. So Torg Eternity is based on the concept of different places out there have different realities, and what is your reality might not work for somebody else, or over there. If you go over there, your reality might not work, and you have to do things under their realities, and vice versa. And then it gets interesting when you have competing realities. If one reality is what's considered dominant over another one, or if it's a mixed reality where they both hold equal weight. So that's a really neat thing. And when I talk about realities, it's kind of useful to think about genres or tropes. So there can be a fantasy reality, and there can be a cyberpunk reality, and there can be a intrigue espionage reality.
There can be, there is.
Well, we're not getting into the super details. But
can I say one thing though, as
sure.
a point of clarification, because you said this last week as well, and it kind of, it's like, you said as the Storm Knights, your reality may not work. That's kind of a misnomer, because the fact that you're a Storm Knight means that you can do what we call create a contradiction. And that means that when you go from your reality where guns work into the fantasy reality that doesn't know what a gun is, and it doesn't work over there, because you're a Storm Knight, you have the ability to bend what's real and what's possible, and you take your reality with you. You're anchored to your reality, so your gun still works when you go into the fantasy reality. The things that you do, whatever is your reality, still works when you go into the places where it doesn't. But because that's one of the things that makes you a Storm Knight, it makes you special, is that you create a contradiction and you keep your stuff working. So for people who don't know what Torganized Play or Torg Eternity is, it isn't that you're suddenly gimped because you built a character all the way around, guns ablazing and kind of stuff, and I walk into Victorian horror where they don't have my technology. You still get to do what you do. You just have some, which we won't get into the weeds, but there's some mechanical possibilities that could happen that become interesting, where your stuff suddenly turns off.
Right, and that's the main reason why it may not work. There are those situations, and we're also talking about the player characters in that, where it's the Storm Knights.
I just didn't want anybody who didn't know not to think, well, I built this guy that does this one thing, and then it doesn't work when I go over here. It does. It just has a potential
to not work.
Story. Yeah, and it becomes a story element that actually a lot of people are like, I don't want to transform into that. I've done it, 3 times now? 3 or 4 times now, and it's actually pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically, we'll get into the higher levels of what that is and what that entails. But yes, it's normally, when we're talking straight reality, certain things in that reality work and certain things that don't. So people in that reality can do things we can't do, and then they can't do things that we can do. And the interesting mix is when you throw these two realities that are competitors together. So
go ahead, say it, Rod. I know you want to.
The rule of two.
So the rule of two. So
multiple Cosms, right? It's what Torg does. I think that no other game has the capability to do, and I think honestly, Torg Eternity does even better than original Torg did. And when we kind of talk about some of the Cosms you want to later, or even the overview there, I'm willing to get into detail. I can talk about that a while. I love that.
I think all of us can. I think we're all capable of nearly perpetual motion in the, hey, somebody kick something off of, what's the topic we're talking about? Torg Eternity. Oh no, we started it.
Right. So yeah, Rod, I loved hearing the rule of two. I think Mark actually told me about it, like the actual words, but he said this came from Rod. So
we had talked that because we were cooperating on writing some stuff together, and it just came out. He said, like, look, and honestly, the idea of it really does come from original Torg, because I think it was the GM, the guide to the GM's guide to the possibility wars. It said, look, you have a simple scenario and it builds a simple scenario, right? And as GMs, many of us were taught early on the KISS rule: keep it simple, stupid. But Torg was different. Keep it complex, make it complicated. Take what you're doing, add another reality, and flip it on its side. When you do that, all of a sudden, possibilities, no pun intended, open up, and you're like, oh, I could do this, and I could do that. Ooh, right? And you have ways to surprise even veteran and jaded players.
Right. And it's within the rules, so it's not like you just pulled the rug out from under them as a ha ha ha, I just changed rules on you. No, you pull the rug out from under them and they're happy about it because they're like, I never even thought that was possible.
You didn't even pull the rug out. You said, move your foot and look down. And like, oh crap, I was standing on it the whole time.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what I love about it.
As a GM, it's a goosebumps moment, because it's just the serendipity of it. It just works. It's beautiful when it happens, right? So Torg does that. I don't know any other game that can.
So it's like taking a premise, adding a different thing to it, and then turning it sideways.
Yeah.
And you start it, and you don't really know where it's going. And when it starts moving, we're going over there. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I like about it, is that you don't know exactly where it's going to go. So you got to be ready, and you got to be flexible to say, okay, let's go over there. What's the story look like over here? Right.
And if we're looking at realities of being kind of a genre, you can have say, Golden Age comic book genre, and what happens when that hero from a comic book type reality ends up in Gothic horror. What happens when that person ends up in, cyberpunk? How do they think? How do they do things? What happens to them, etc. So that's what is great about the mixing of it. It's not just this guy has magic and this guy has tech and the rules are the same. They just, one works magical and one works tech. It's no, the whole concept might not even be understood by the other person. And when you mix the stuff together, you don't always get the same results. So that's...
You even referred to that earlier this evening when you had mentioned tropes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Torg is the ability very much to have tropes. And when folks are new and coming in, I say, look, find a trope and lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have a lot of fun when you kind of lean into that trope. But second, now all of a sudden, when you're, like you said, I'm a Nile hero, hands on hips, and I go into Victorian horror, and I'm like, I have this gentleman follow me. I go through the door, and everyone's like, and he comes out, and people are like, oh my, I'm afraid now. You lean into those tropes and play it, so that when something happens, like Mark said, that takes you in a different direction, it's going to stretch you as a role player. It's going to make you do things you wouldn't. Just the change in perspective is a magic that is unique to Torg.
Right.
I'm a missionary for Torg to anyone I talk to.
And it is fun. You can take the same character, you can get a character, and if they survive, you can experience different genres, different realities with that same character. So it's like, this week we're playing this with a twist, and the next week we're playing this other genre with a twist. So it's not like having to learn entirely new games to get things.
And
go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
That back in the day, there was a game called Star Patrol. It's out of print now, but it was a science fiction role playing game. But what made it unique was it had rules for going. It was kind of like Traveler in that you could go from all the planets had tech levels, right? and all the weapons and all the armor and all of the abilities had tech levels, and you had to go to a tech level planet, whatever, to get all this stuff. And I looked at it and said, you know what? You could do time travel with this. And then, so I started a time travel game based on that. But when Torg Eternity, or when original Torg, when Rod said, hey, I got this thing called Torg. You want to try this? It grew into, oh, this is perfect, because what I always wanted to do with it was, well, okay, how do you take an M16 into D&D, and now I got fireballs and M16s? Which one's going to kill the dragon better? Well, you got to make that up, and when two DMs do it, it's going to, if you like the spell side better, the fireball's going to work better. If you like firearms better, firearms are going to work better. Well, in Torg Eternity, we got rules for that, right? So you don't have, it's not arbitrary anymore. It's, well, this is how it works. Go for it. And you got the core Earth guy standing there with his M4, plinking away at a dragon, realizing what I really need are law rockets. and the elven spellcaster over there going, what we really need is for that guy to get law rockets. And so now both the elf is trying to figure out how to get law rockets at the same time, because you just can't overcome. Well, I'm not going to get in the weeds because you don't want to get in the weeds of that. But that's the beauty of Torg Eternity, is that you don't have to figure. The GM doesn't have to. Well, how am we going to make that work? You just have to read about it. There you go.
So speaking, when you were talking about the other game, Star Patrol, you mentioned tech, so that immediately makes me think we were talking about realities, and another more like a slight detail of the realities is they are a genre, but or a smash up of genres. But they each have 4 what are called axioms, which are the base of the reality, and then the reality also might have world laws. So the axioms in Torg Eternity are, you have tech, you have spirit, you have magic, and you have social. So depending on how high that axiom is, the thing that you're trying to do may or may not I'll say work in future episodes. When we get more in detail, we'll talk about contradictions and what that means. But basically, does that reality accept it? If somebody is in that reality, from that reality, does it work? So Mark's holding up for the people not on the podcast. He's just holding up what the different Cosm axioms are. So,
and that's the beautiful thing in the book, is that it's got these breakdowns in the core rule book. If you want to know how it breaks down, what fits in where, at what level, and what number translates to what, you can break it down and figure out where, for tech, where do radio broadcasts start, and where does a semi-automatic weapon fit in, and blah blah blah. So it tells you that. You can learn how all those axioms and all the different parts that Leamon was just talking about fit in. You don't have to guess there either.
You have a future episode there, Leamon, on, all right, let's talk about pocket domains and how to design your own with the axiom table, right?
Right. So basically, with each reality, they have those 4 axioms. And if you're trying to do something magical, and you're trying to do something at, say, what's considered an axiom of 16, if you are from that reality and the reality's axiom of magic is 16 or less, you can do it. If it's not by that reality, it's not allowed. So, and the same thing with tech, as Mark was saying, semi-automatic guns would be under a certain tech level. If they're under it, they work fine. If they're over it, that reality considers that it's impossible. It breaks their laws of physics, which are different than our laws of physics in
which
many
becomes
cases.
A contradiction.
Right. And then there's the spirit, which is faith-based. Miracles, deities, do they exist? How powerful are they in the world? What their followers or their clergy, if you want to get a little more technical, what miracles they're able to possess. And then social can be anything from, are we on a tribal setting? Are we on hunter-gathering? Are we able to have sovereign nations? Are we able to think of care beyond just our own survival? Kingdoms, democracies, etc. That can all be social, as well as how things are influenced out there. Propaganda can be part of the social, as well as psychic. Psychic abilities are based off of a social aspect in Torg Eternity. So, comments from the gallery, if you have any to add to what I just said.
In case there's anyone who had played original Torg and hasn't gone into Torg Eternity yet, first, you should. But second, the social axiom in Torg Eternity, as you said a moment ago, defines psychic abilities, right? Psionic abilities. That was not very well defined in the original, right? It was kind of added a little bit later and then eventually came in. It was here and there. But from the beginning, Torg Eternity brought it in, and it works very well. It's much smoother than it had been originally. And the few cosms, the few realities that have that, they definitely benefit from it, right? Mm-hmm. So I would always recommend that. And then I think you had mentioned very briefly world laws. So I want to give Mark a chance to reply to Axioms, but don't forget about me when we talk about world laws. Oh.
So we were talking about veteran GMs, and Rod, you mentioned for the jaded gamer or someone who's I've seen it all, I've done it all. Oh, wait a minute, what was that? I've never seen that before. Torg Eternity is full of that, and the axioms, the 4 axioms, gives you a lot of room for the veteran GM to bring into the game for veteran players an aspect that they're not used to, that brings back some of the fresh, hey, this is a new thing for me, and now I'm, go back to that, harken back to that time when it wasn't so, oh yeah, how do I do my D8 of damage in this system? Okay, yeah, okay, what are we doing? Okay, how does what do I got to roll for this? All right, fine. And it's not rote anymore, because now you're sitting there going, well, if I pick that up, first of all, can I use it? And if I do use it, does the place I'm in support me using it? Because, and I know we're trying to stay away from the weeds too much, but contradictions, when you're talking about axioms, contradictions, you almost can't not talk about contradictions. So if I am from a Tech 18 Cosm, that means anything from 18 or below is technology that I'm familiar with and that my Cosm supports. Anything with a tech level of 19 or higher is a contradiction to me and a contradiction to my Cosm. And so when I step out of my Cosm, I need to know what the tech axiom is, or any of the other 4, depending on what my abilities do, so that I know whether or not I'm creating a contradiction. That's important, because in gameplay, if I fail to do something badly enough and I'm creating a contradiction, bad things happen.
I'm used to that.
I'm very used to that. That goes back to that I've transformed 4 times, which I won't get into that, but that's how you get to the point where it becomes a game mechanic and a viable threat to the players, to the Storm Knights, because every zone you go to is rated as a pure zone, dominant zone, or mixed zone based on the cosms that are there, and then the tools you're using within that cosm become problematic for whether they're a contradiction to you, a contradiction to the cosm, or a contradiction to both, which dictates when bad things happen to you when you're trying to do things,
or if you want to play it safe,
and it goes into your decision making. When I'm in Aurorsh, the gothic horror, gaslight horror, whatever you want to call it, and I've got a law rocket and it's not supported by gothic horror, do I really want to pull that out and shoot the bad guy with the law rocket? What are my chances of that going badly for me instead of for the bad guy?
Sure.
Rod's tagline is, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yes.
That's where that comes from. It's not always fine.
Right.
So
to move on, let's just talk for now, let's just talk about individual realities. So not crossing reality. So when
Okay.
you're in one reality, you are of that reality, no contradictions at all because you haven't encountered another reality. So like if you're
Okay.
if you're on a Cosm in your home reality and you've never interacted with another reality, your Cosm doesn't let you do the things above your axioms, whatever.
Well, you don't even know they
that are.
exist.
Well, yeah. Plus, it's beyond your comprehension that those things exist. So you have your axioms, which tell you how much magic can I do, how much spirit stuff can I do, how's the tech work, or possibilities of how the tech works, and the same thing with social. But now the world laws. So each reality has normally three major world laws and then minor world laws that kind of tailor it so that it's not just the generic, oh, this is the generic fantasy world, this is generic cyberpunk world, that it starts adding specific things. So I'll let you guys talk about world laws because you seem really eager.
That's where the fun is.
The designers for Torg Eternity, when it comes to the world laws, knocked it out of the park compared to original Torg. Original Torg was good. Again, it convinced me to change my play style when I was about 20 or so. No, not even. I was in high school, right? So it impacted my play style. So obviously, I loved that game, but they knocked it out of the park because the world laws they were defined from the beginning. They were better defined, and they give flavor to every Cosm you go into, right?
That's unique.
It is, and it makes them unique. I've read reviews online. People have said, there are two Cosms that have a pulpy feel, right? And we could talk about individuals at some point and talk about that. There are three Cosms that have a cyberpunk feel because the designers split different elements out. But the world laws make it really individualize it. Talking about the social axiom, you have Core Earth at 23, Pan Pacific at 24, and Darkhold 25. The world laws make all three of those places vastly, vastly different. And you're going to tell, if you only stick to one, you're going to tell very, very different stories in each of those, right? For Earth, we've said before, that's your action moving. The example I like to say to folks is, it's not every year terrorists try to blow up a building in Los Angeles at Christmas time, but it has been known to happen, right? Whereas Pan Pacifica, you have a lot more of those gritty, those gritty detective stories. Rainy nights, the spy stuff going on. One axiom point different there. One axiom point different on the tech, but the world laws make all the difference. Darkhold, we just don't have enough time to get into how that's compared to the first two. But the world laws is where the game is going to be unique. And I've always felt that's really what differentiates Torg Eternity from any other multi-genre game, right? There aren't that many, but it differentiates it because instead of saying, hey, let's throw it in a big pot and mix it, by having it in different places and you go from one to the other, or bring one into the other, right, for the rule of two, it changes every story and everything that you're going through. I can't compare that. It's, it's always every time I think about it, it's that good.
That's another thing that Torg Eternity did, which I think is really, really well done in the update versus original Torg, relating to world laws. In that's the Cosm cards, which to me, the Cosm cards are a lot more world law related than the rest. And for what, if you're not familiar with Torg or original Torg or Torg Eternity, this is one of the few role-playing games that has a card aspect to it. And there are a number of different cards, which I won't get into the weeds about, but since we're on world laws, there's a very small deck of between 10 and 20 cards called Cosm cards. And when you enter a Cosm, there's a chance that you're going to pick up a Cosm card for that Cosm, or if it's mixed and there's two of them going on, then the GM gets to figure out whether or not you get one from this Cosm or one from this Cosm. And then when you do, all of those Cosm cards relate to the world law or world laws for the Cosm they come from, right? So you have this card play that allows you to do a thing, or sometimes they're really horrible things, but you get bonuses for taking on. It's kind of like Fate, where you're you have a compel. Somebody says, well, this is your thing that makes life harder for you. I'm going to compel you. Here's your fate token because we're going to make life more difficult for you guys because I'm making you hurt your party
It's
based
a
on your backstory.
risk reward system.
Yeah, it's a risk reward. Exactly right. It's a risk reward. But you choose whether or not you're going to play that. Some of them say you must play, but most of them are, okay, who's got cyberware? I'm terribly sorry, but you have a mandatory upgrade. Boom. And then I get possibilities while you're completely incapacitated with this mandatory upgrade. And, and your buddy is looking at you going, really? We're in the middle of combat and that's what you're going to do to me? Yeah, I need possibilities, man. Sorry.
Mark, and I appreciate you helping the team by suffering for me. Thank you.
That's right. Absolutely. But that was another really nice upgrade from original Torg to Torg Eternity, was the addition of the Cosm cards, because they give you another avenue for we talked about resources last time, right? As a GM, it's really, really tough to plan around that, because you look at it and go, okay, well, they're in this Cosm and they've got those Cosm cards. I hammered them over here. They're going to need some more possibilities, but I can't count on them which cards they get. Right. And so whether or not they're going to get any possibilities that is out of my hands, but they could.
And I will just clarify for the cards, it's not like a collectible card game where you just keep buying and buying and buying and buying cards. So the main, what's called the drama deck, even though it includes 3 different types of cards, there's a main deck which is about two to 3, say, playing cards big that you can buy, and those will do various aspects of the game, including the Cosm cards that Mark just talked about. Besides that, each of the realities has its own deck of cards, which is about the size of a regular, playing cards if you're doing poker or whatever. And you don't have to. They add flavor, but they're not required.
No. There's the 10 for Living Lands.
So basically, I just wanted to say it's not like that game where there's rares and super rares and commons. It's just you buy the base, and then anything that you wish to add on is completely your choice. How much, it's not required. It's fun, yes, and I'm going to promote them because I love Torg Eternity, but it's not something that I want anybody to back away from playing Torg.
It's not
Eternity.
collectible. No. This is like you get the set that you need to run, and if that's all you want, that's all you get. But Drive Through RPG has a number of creators who have put up some really good, I don't know what you want to call them, bonus sets, additions, whatever you want to
additional
call it.
Cards. So
yeah.
there are third-party content producers who have made really, really good cards out there. So that is, something that can be looked at. I just want to make sure that people understand that they don't have to go into this huge long thing of it's like the collectible card games. It's not. It's a base deck that you can get that can satisfy you. If you want more, there's lots of options out there, but it's all optional.
And even you had said, right, those they come with the base game, right? By the base game, they can be purchased separately if someone wanted to have extras.
Right.
I don't think they would, but I'll tell you what I had done. And if you get the PDF off the drive-thru, they print as card size. I went and bought a couple of packs of bicycle cards. I cut all my PDFs out. I taped it and I sleeved them, and it worked just fine. It was a nice, inexpensive solution, so I could have it. Additionally, I know you guys are aware, you can use it on a couple of free tabletops as well, build cards, deal them out. And that's typically when when we're playing online, it works very, very well.
Roll20's made that, yeah.
Because since it's not collectible, everybody has them. There's no aspect whatsoever of pay to win in this game, right? With the exception of my character has possibilities, and I'm going to spend one to get better at what I did. That's an in-character decision, right? And it's hey, I'm buying those things. Characters get them every single scenario, so no pay to win.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that, but that's a great point about each reality has its axioms, each reality has world laws that make it different from other possibly similar realities, and one of the aspects of those world laws are the Cosm cards. The Cosm cards are linked to the world laws.
Can I say one other thing about world laws?
Mm-hmm.
We've hinted at, and this might be the fact that we all write for this. Rod writes for the official stuff as well. It sounds a lot like this is more of an RP or a flavor thing. The world laws have most of them have mechanical results that the players can take advantage of, that rewards them playing their character like they are from the Cosm that they come from. So when you're playing a Living Land character who has the law of savagery and all out attack comes out on a card, and you take the very vulnerable condition to go all out attack and make yourself easier to hit by the bad guy, you get to add a bonus die to that, and you're accessing the world law of the Cosm you came from. There's a game mechanical aspect to those world laws that allow the players to embrace where they come from. And so it's not a storytelling thing that the GM is just, here's my Living Land savagery club that I'm beating you over the head with. Well, it's both and.
Yeah.
And for people who have no idea what Mark just said, we will have future episodes explaining what bonus dice and that type of thing is.
Sorry,
but basically,
I'm getting too deep in the weeds. I can't help myself.
More damage.
More damage, yes.
So basically, yes, there are like I said, each reality has 3 major world laws. Each of those has a mechanic. 2 of them have a flat-out mechanic, and one of them, the mechanic is through the Cosm cards. So that's basically how each of the major realities are set up, and they all have mechanics, but they are there to enforce the flavor of that reality, and as Mark says, make you want to, even if you're from a different reality, it makes you want to embrace the reality that you're in, if not just temporarily.
You don't have to be like the cyber papacy guy who's the Shadowrun kind of guy. Doesn't have to be from Living Land to do the same thing. He can go, wait, we're in Living Land. I can be savage. I can do more damage. Okay.
Right. His reality might not like it and might slap him on the wrist, depending on what it is.
Correct.
We'll get into the mechanics of that in a future episode. But
sorry,
just
I
say,
suck at the macro thing.
I know. Beforehand, it was like, try to keep it macro. We'll get micro later, but it's when you love the game, you just want to keep going and going and going further.
It just happens.
So we have these things called realities. These realities are based off of axioms, the 4 axioms, what level they are. It goes from 0 it's not even understood. Like a 0 magic, the people in that reality would have no concept of what magic is whatsoever. If it was, it would
talk about it.
You just can't think about it. It's not there. Somebody else could be telling you about it, and you would just never understand it. It's like astrophysics to me.
Even better, especially with magic. You could have an Isle character in a Cosm that has a 0 magic, and they're doing magic because they can create a contradiction. They're casting magical spells in front of a character that has 0 magic, and they would, in their head, make up an excuse for why it's something else.
They would be the super skeptic who's trying to figure out how you're doing sleight of hand to do this thing.
You are the best magician I have ever seen. That's amazing. How do you do that trick?
Not magician, because magic doesn't even exist.
Okay, fair.
Oh my gosh, your technology is out of this world. I have to figure out how you build that.
It must be magic.
Yeah.
So that's with the realities. The realities are based in what's called a Cosm. So we'll kind of move over into a Cosm, a singular Cosm. Okay, so one Cosm. One Cosm is the source of a reality.
Original Torg.
And Torg Eternity.
Well, but it wasn't original Torg a Cosm.
No, well, he's going to get There you go.
Okay, all right, I'm getting ahead of him.
Okay.
I'll stop.
So there is the reality is its source is a cosm, and a cosm can be as big as what we on this Earth would consider the universe. So all the planets, all the stars out in the Milky Way and beyond, and all the galaxies, Big Bang, whatever you want to say, that can be one cosm. It can also be a reality that is as small as here's a flat Earth on a disk where the sun comes up and it moves around this flat disk and the stars are fixed up in the sky. Nothing else beyond that. Nothing else. That also can be a cosm. So a cosm isn't a size, and it's not necessarily a thing that from the one cosm you can just get in a spaceship and fly to the other ones. They're completely separated. They are completely different realities, and they do not normally interconnect in any way, shape, or form. So anything you guys want to add to it or your views on it?
I've used, when talking to folks who aren't familiar with the game, the concept of think of it as a different dimension, right? So, and for us, right, we'd have our cosm. We'd have the cosm of Middle Earth. We'd have the cosm of Narnia for people who play different RPGs, right? Pick any of those worlds or those settings. Those are different cosms. You could look at Robert A. Heinlein when he's, I think it's The Number of the Beast, where he defines world as myth of, hey, everything that we have thought of that has been written in literature would be a cosm somewhere out there, right? So anything that you can think of, you put those 4 axioms together, you put the world laws together, that's a cosm, right? And I think that's what you're saying. It's self-contained, right. And typically, unless there's special things going on, it doesn't interact with any other cosm.
Right, yes.
Unless someone forced it to.
Or there's like a world law that does something weird. But yes, for the most part, unless someone goes, you know what, there's some metaphysical rules that govern that govern reality and existence, and I feel like breaking them, the cosms don't come together.
Right.
But
right.
no one would ever break those, right?
Nobody would ever. What are we going to be talking about in about 20, X many minutes?
Now, okay, I'll wait.
Okay, so then that's pretty much, you have a self-contained reality that's in a cosm. That's what I would call the home source, the source of that. So when you have all of these cosms out there that are all not connected, but all exist within, whether you want to say the same GM has them existing, or the same table, the same group, the same organization, etc., then you have what is a cosmverse. So it is one person, one group's view on all the different cosms that they're going to play with. You know, if they're playing with Legos and G.I. Joes and Transformers, what are their things that they're playing with? It's kind of your toy. Your cosmverse is your toy box. Is I guess a very general way to look at it. And then when you think one step further of what's my neighbor's toy box and what's the person down the street's toy box, and when everybody's toy boxes, you might have the same toys. You know, okay, my toys were 70s and 80s, so, you know, let's go G.I. Joe Transformers might be in mine and a Voltron. Somebody else might have some G.I. Joes, but maybe they're later ones after I stopped collecting, or maybe there's some that are the same. But, or, you know, Mark in his toy box had Micronauts, so each person might have some similarities, some differences, but everybody has their toy box. So in Torg Eternity, consider your cosmverse your toy box. Everybody out there has their toy box. And when you think of all of them together in an infinite amount of everybody who has possibly ever lived, living now, living in the future, etc., to infinity, that is the infiniverse.
Wrap your head a little bit around some quantum physics for that, right? What you're really looking at is the Schrodinger's cosm of cosmverses, right? So, and the original Torg used the example of, if, for example, Mark shoots me because I talk too much, I do, he shoots me, he has a chance to either hit me or miss me. Both don't happen. So there could be something that branches off where now there's a cosmverse where he shot me. that Cosmverse is not nearly as interesting as the one where he missed the better Cosmverse ultimately, right? And that's if you're going to look at it from our standpoint. From the game, right? I know, Leamon, you have your own home game. I have my own home game. Mark has been so busy, and every time he's offered to run a home game, I'm like, well, I got mine going. Don't worry. Just do more to organized play stuff. But Mark has taken the lead role in story for to organized play. And if we were to use Prince Earwig, I don't want to use his real name, from Discord, the maps that he's built, and I'll eventually share one of those if you don't mind in the comments, he's built maps of where all the different realities are on Earth. Mm-hmm. Mine is going to look very different from your home game, right? It's going to look different from organized play. But every single one of them, as you, I think, said last week, it's canon. It's happened.
Yes, it's canon. Yep. It's happened out there. They can be separate and all have happened and all are connected through the infinitiverse, and that's really cool to just think. I mean, yes, it's similar to if I'm playing on a world popular setting of a famous RPG and you are, and Rod, and you are Mark, but it's different to think that the actual company says they all happened and they're all true.
Yeah.
As an official line of the company, instead of saying, oh, your homebrew's out there, oh, your homebrew's out there, we accept it, we say it's fine, or we're not going to, the RP police and the canon police aren't going to be knocking on your door. That's one thing. But with Torg Eternity, it's actually canon. It's in there. The game company that owns the game is saying, yes, all three of us are right.
Because it's an infiniverse.
Yeah. The infiniverse is a very empowering concept for a GM in terms of because there are a lot of folks, especially beginning GMs, who might think, well, I'm not sure if I should do this. It might not be the right way, or it might be wrong. And Mark, you kind of made this point, I think, last week of I like to know, I like a rule set that says, hey, do what the GM says. The GM's free to make changes. And it's baked in. It's part of Torg Eternity, right? So it's very hard, near impossible, to say, yes, you're doing it wrong with Torg Eternity. How do you see it? What are the ideas you have, your homebrew, as it's just as valid as mine. It's mine's not more or less, right? Mm-hmm. And the official version, one could argue, is also not more or less. It's how the folks who started out designing the game said, you know what, statistically, in our version of the Cosmverse, this is how we saw things play out.
Right, this hopefully will be useful for the most people out there.
Yeah.
But it's like having a conversation. You got to start the conversation somewhere, and then it gets to go where the conversation goes, right? And that Ulysses Spila has started the conversation. And now we as independent GMs get to take it where we take it.
And then for each published thing, it's hey, here's an addition to the conversation. Keep it or change it or do what you want. This is just furthering the conversation.
Here's another subject. Here's another topic.
Yeah. I can tell you as well, there are things that with once we saw the new Pan Pacifica book that you had mentioned to me, Liam, and you may remember I said to you once, I went, my mind was blown. And that has directly impacted my home game.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it has.
About you haven't seen it yet, Mark. So when you talk about the conversation, we'll blame him. When you talk about the conversation and changing it, it does, right? And that's one thing. If we all gamed in a vacuum, we all only have our own ideas, right? By having a Cosmverse, by engaging on Discord, Facebook, or Twitter, or however people are engaging with the other Torg players and GMs. Or like Mark and I do with Organized Play, you get so many more ideas. Hopefully this, things like you're doing here will give players and GMs so many more ideas of what can I do that's going to, for a GM, make the game I'm doing interesting to both my players and to me. And for players to say, what can I bring into my game, into how I play, that's going to entertain this entire table, right? Mm-hmm. You do that, you have 5 players in a GM, all 6 are winning.
Right.
And that's ultimately when you have 6 people sitting around at a table, or 3 or 2 or whatever, the goal isn't I hit glory, or I rolled this damage, or I took out the bad guy, or I did this, or I did. It's, did you have fun?
Yeah.
And the goal, from my perspective, when I write stuff, it's everybody has fun. It's not this guy's going to have fun, or this woman's going to have fun, or this dude's going to have fun, or she's going to have fun. It's going to be everybody, GM and players, all have fun.
With a multi-genre system, you can do it a little easier because someone's like, I'm really in the mood for sci-fi. I'm in the mood for fantasy. No. I want absolutely gritty realism. All right, guys, I have the game for you. Mm-hmm. I think it was Deanna who had given that quote of imagine a role-playing game. Was that Deanna's? Imagine a role-playing game with an adventuring party consisting of John McClane, Harry Potter, Van Helsing, Captain America, Lara Croft, and Jackie Chan. And then says, hey, they're going to all these different places, right? They fight Belloc in the Land of the Lost. They fight some ninjas in Cairo, whatever. That's the game, right? And that's the rule of two, which is Torg at its finest, right? And no other game is able to do.
And
again, proselytize.
That's fine. That's why we're here.
Welcome to the channel to proselytize.
So, it's also really cool when you're a player. Even though before Torg Eternity, I wasn't player for like 20-something years. I was always game mastering. When I first played, I made a character that I liked from a reality, and somebody else made a character they liked for a reality. And half of the game was being amazed by what the other person did. And half of our party were different types of clergy. So I was invoking these miracles over here, and this other guy from this reality was invoking completely different miracles. And we both kind of looked at each other and said, "You can do that? What are you doing?" It wasn't on our miracle lists, and that's always really cool when you as a player, you can even understand the game and be surprised because somebody else is pulling other tricks out of their hat that you. I won't say you don't have access to, but are just completely different than the tricks that you have.
I started, actually, someone invited me to a game recently. They said, hey, I want to teach Torg to some friends, and are you interested in playing? I said, absolutely. So I'm getting to play, and I have a character who has some, neo-pagan core earth miracles. And then there's somebody at the table who's from Aurorsh, Saklam, a harsh, judgment-based faith. And that player had never played Torg before, but he fell into it. He's got it, right? So our characters are, kind of going at it a little bit, but in a way that's both entertaining to both of us and the table. Mm-hmm. And it's surprising how easy it is to get into that and see the difference. And, my character, I want to have him have this view and this world view and this lens to see stuff. And, this is someone who's only been playing Torg for 6 or 7 weeks, and it's starting to click. So it's nice to see how easy that is.
Okay, so let's. We talked about realities. We talked about the Cosms and all of that, and we hinted, and this is where it becomes an actuality of talking about how do we end up if these Cosms are all sealed off from each other, different dimensions. How do we interact? How do we get that rule of two? And the main answer, not the only answer, but the main answer is the darkness devices and the High Lords. So in the lore, we talked last time, there is Eternity and the Void, and Eternity spawned off or did something, and Apiros was a more sentient version of Eternity, and the Void made the Nameless one. So the Void and the Void side is basically trying to destroy everything and making nothing, and the Eternity creation side is trying to make something. So there are these things when there's the infinitiverse and you have an infinite amount of Cosmverses. How do you destroy an infinite amount of Cosmverses? And the darkness device is kind of the first step of that. It's a piece of the void or a construct of the void that can destroy or consume, both for use and to just destroy possibilities. So you have these devices. These devices are scattered through different cosms. Not every cosm necessarily has one. But if there is a unique, evil enough, smart enough, devious enough being in that cosm, then the darkness device may choose it. And the darkness device is kind of limited in what it can do. It's destructive, it can't create. So thinking of new ideas is very difficult for it. So if it can attach itself as either, depending on the darkness device, you can have a symbiotic relationship, which they work well together, or you can have a completely parasitic relationship where one kind of dominates the other one and is taking from it. But you have a person that connects to a darkness device and becomes a High Lord. And then once they are together, the darkness device, being a piece or a construction of the void, can move between cosms. It can link two cosms together. If you want to say it's like building a bridge, that's a term that's used, the Maelstrom Bridge. You can say it's, if you want to use some destructive method, it's boring a hole from one cosm into another cosm and then linking them that way. But that's the kind of the main, not the only, but the main way of invading another cosm. And basically there's this energy, possibility energy, that's the possibilities of eternity. And the void starts sucking these up. The High Lord is given a lot of this power, of this energy through the darkness device, and the darkness device can suck and devour the other ones off. So that's kind of a really, really high level version, but that's why there are invasions. A High Lord and a darkness device link. The darkness device tells the High Lord, hey, there's this cosm over here, we can invade it and take all of its energy, all of its source, its resources, whatever you want to designate as that thing over there that I would like to have. And that is how you get the invasions of why one cosm can link to the other one, the reasons behind it, and why it becomes a dramatic thing and not just two cosms link and they shake hands and have fun. It's because it's an invasion. So your two thoughts on that? Yes.
Well, so the reason that the game exists in the first place is that this is kind of high level. I'll try and keep it macro. We exist on core Earth, our planet, our universe. What we would interact with on the internet or see as that's core Earth. Nile Empire, Cyber Papacy, Living Land, Aurosh, Isle. All of these are Pan-Pacifica. All of these are the other invading cosms. The Gaunt Man, the guy on that cover for those in the podcast, I showed the cover that the core rulebook has the Gaunt Man on it. He kind of got all of these other High Lords. He connected with all these other High Lords and said, I know a place that's just brimming with possibility energy. Let's go there. You guys help me out for reasons. I'll give you some things to you come. And so they all invade core Earth to plunder us from our possibility energy, right? Because they're darkness devices, as Leamon said, constructs of the void want to suck this cosm dry of everything that's possible. But we have hope. Our world law, the law of hope. We have hope. And so we're fighting back. That's really the high level premise of the game, is that a Storm Knight, the character that players build, are fighting back against these High Lords to repel the invasions from the various other cosms to protect our possibility energy. And that's where the game itself kicks off.
Indirectly fighting, right? Because at the start of, hey, I'm a new character, the power gulf between the two is insurmountable.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So it is indirect. One of the things that it's probably worth adding for the High Lords and the Darkness devices, each one of them is also kind of related to the cosm it comes from, right? They are, you could say that they're influenced by the reality, their native reality, and they influence it as well.
Right, it's circular.
Yeah, yeah.
bound by their own world laws and axioms.
Self-reinforcing, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So it makes it where it's not there's not a single High Lord that is generic or a cookie cutter. Every single one of them, when you read what they do, when you read how they do it, their methods, their thought processes, each one of them you can read as a unique individual character. Irredeemably evil, absolutely. That's about where the similarity ends. They're all irredeemably evil and want to destroy
Well,
life.
but they all want to be Torg.
What?
They all want to be Torg.
Yeah, I included that in the irredeemably evil. It's okay. It's there, right? But that's what they want, to destroy all life, just about, so that they can rule. Think about that. That's why they've come. The possibility energy, right? Think about it. When if you have kids or you talk to young folks and you're saying, especially if there are teachers out there, someone is living up to their potential, or that parent-teacher conference. Well, Billy could be better if he would just do this. He'd be working to his potential. That's what our possibilities are. It's our potential to do better, to be better, to invent, to create, to make art. For some of us, honestly, to GM, right? To create those stories that we like to tell each other, and that just because the communicating of stories just between people, it's enjoyable, and there's an energy that goes back and forth, right? The three of us are sitting in very disparate places, but there's still an energy that goes back and forth as we all get excited and start to riff. That's the possibility energy that they've come to suck out. All of that gone. Why? Because it's delicious, and I want it, and I don't care that you need it. And the flavor of how they do it, just beautiful, right? And I won't draw the parallel, I'm going to lie here now, between the Gaunt Man and GM, which most of us abbreviate Gaunt Man as GM. I had been doing Torg for decades, and it wasn't until somebody in Torg Eternity's like, well, the Gaunt Man is the GM, and I went, wait, what? Oh my gosh, how did I miss that all these years? The Gaunt Man is the GM, the Game Master? No, that's not what you mean. I loved it.
and for those who have no idea what the Gaunt Man is like in Torg Eternity lore, in this invasion of Core Earth, he is the oldest, most powerful, smartest. He's most experienced High Lord who has contacted various other High Lords and said, hey, here's a nice chunk of possibility energy that we can all get fat on. Now, saying that, he has ulterior motives, and a bunch of evil people are going to stab each other in the back and everything.
Plans within plans.
But that is the thing. He's the most experienced, the most knowledgeable of the infinitiverse, and he brings other High Lords into Core Earth invasion, and that's where we get the possibility wars. So I'm going to say thanks, everybody, for listening. We are just a few minutes after 1 hour. We will get more in depth in future episodes. We'll specifically talk about this Core Earth invasion, the other High Lords. We'll also get into very details about the different Cosms, what they are. We talked and named a few of them, but we'll get into those details. Also, we'll get into mechanics and stuff, which Mark likes to do.
Sorry.
He throws out mechanics, and yes, it's very entwined. Torg Eternity is a game where the mechanics and the lore heavily reinforce each other. It's not just we're trying to shoehorn this setting into a rule set, or we're shoehorning a rule set into the setting. They're very intertwined, and that is also another reason where I love Torg. So once again, this is the Delphi Council Debriefings. You can email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. You can comment, you can ask questions. We'll answer questions here on the recordings. And anything else you want to say before we end?
Thank you for having me. Happy
Thanks
to
for
be here.
coming.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. Look, I can. You said an hour, so I did my best not to talk too much. It was a struggle, but it's Torg. I can talk all night. Ask Mark; he knows.
Yeah, and we did have more planned, but this was the meat of what we had planned, the main thing. So that's why it's a episodic and not just a trying to shove everything in. We'll get an hour, hopefully every week or so, of adding more detail and stuff. So on behalf of myself, Leamon, Rod, and Mark, we thank you for listening to us for the hour. Come back next week, and hopefully we'll have another episode ready for you then. So this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Briefings, and until next time, do we want to try to come up with a catchphrase or something?
Yeah, we don't have one yet, but we're going to have to come up with one.
You know,
Something.
I would say to anybody who's a role player, game on.
Game on. Or
Game on, you know.
Star, game on.
Star, game on.
have to come up with something, the game on in your own Cosmverse or within the infinitiverse or something like that. So.
Yep.
Okay, we'll go ahead and stop. Thank you all. Bye.